shuttles to nearby hotels. They would be capable of pulling off this kind of attack if indeed that is what we are witnessing. What do you suspect is going on in Afghanistan right now?
Well, let's understand we're capable of pulling it off if that's what it is, but it's probably more likely the followers of Shah Massoud, who was deliberately bombed just yesterday and who was seriously injured, if not killed. Now, his representatives say he was injured, but he's all right. But there is some indication that he may have died in the attack, and he was, of course, the opposition to the Taliban over in Afghanistan, so it's a very serious situation over there as well.
But what about what former Secretary of Defense William Cohen just mentioned, that you would want to know who actually carried off these attacks before you planned any kind of retaliatory strike if this is not a result of some conflict within Afghanistan?
Well, I agree with Secretary Cohen. We have to be very cautious. On the other hand, I thought Secretary Eagleburger was very honest when he said that, look, the Taliban have been harboring Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden has said that it is the duty of every Muslim to kill Americans. There's every indication that he has been behind some of the attacks against American installations, and we happen to know just today that we've got information that indicates that representatives who are affiliated with Osama bin Laden were actually saying over the airwaves that, the private airwaves at that they had hit 2 targets. If you go back to the Millennium scare that we had before the year 2000, Osama bin Laden was in the middle of all of that, and the people associated with him and affiliated with him was in the middle of that. So this is a very serious situation. So they should not be harboring this criminal, and we've got to, it seems to me, go after him. And it does look, although the evidence is fragmentary, as though he's had a major role in what's happened here today.
Secretary Cohen, are you as convinced as Senator Hatch is that Osama bin Laden played some role in this tragedy here today?
I think if you were to cast the searchlight of probability on these footprints, they would lead to Osama bin Laden, but I still think that we have to get more evidence. This is not evidence that you would need in the prosecution of a criminal act. I distinguish between terrorism and a criminal act. And so I would think you just need more evidence than we have right now, but it doesn't have to be something you can use in a court of law. I think that the probability is it points to Osama bin Laden himself or the groups that he supports. And therefore, I think we ought to keep our focus very much on him, but not exclude others. And so I think a little more time is necessary, but I don't disagree with Secretary Eagleburger that we need to respond swiftly and very strongly to those who have inflicted this great tragedy upon the American people.
Secretary Cohen, it's Aaron Brown. We have heard in a number of conversations that we've had today that the United States needs to be more aggressive or more proactive in its counterterrorism efforts, that you can't wait until something has happened, that you have to stop it before, and it may be that some innocents will suffer because of it. That's a political problem, isn't it?
It is, and the thing we have to keep in mind is we do not want to allow terrorists to strike such terror in the hearts of the American people that we become like them, that we become indifferent to how many innocent people that we might kill. That is what separates us from terrorism and from the terrorists. We have a higher standard. So we have to be very careful in how we respond and how we take action against those who are planning further acts of terrorism against the American people, so that we don't become drawn down into that level of evil that they have perpetrated. So that's what distinguishes the American people and our ideals, and we ought to adhere to those.
And Senator Hatch, you think that the political equation on how the United States deals with this has changed because of what's happened today?
No question about it. We can't take this kind of action without a very heavy response. And we have some information. It may be fragmentary, but the fact is we have some information that indicates that that Osama bin Laden and many of his affiliates and associates, he's certainly the motivating force behind these people. He certainly has the money, and he certainly has the ability to motivate antagonistic forces against the United States, and he said he wants to do that. So it looks very much like that, although we're not absolutely certain at this point.
We'll be going back to CNN a little bit later in the show for you. That, of course, being in Kabul, Afghanistan. The fire you saw there was allegedly a bomb in the area of an airport. It's 2:30 in the morning there. And we should also say that followers of bin Laden are saying that they've had nothing to do with this. So it's an interesting scenario indeed.
But again, obviously, someone is targeting bin Laden tonight. Whether it's the United States or not is still not known.
All right, as we sat and watched our country under attack today, our city leaders took some precautions to...
Minister Tony Blair emerged from an emergency meeting of his senior ministers to say his country would stand shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. in a crusade to eliminate such attacks.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world. The people who perpetrate it have no regard whatever for the sanctity or value of human life. And we, the democracies of the world, must come together to defeat it and eradicate it.
Tonight, NATO ambassadors met in Brussels just hours after all non-essential personnel were sent home from the alliance's headquarters. And tomorrow, European Union foreign ministers will meet in emergency session. But all of this furious flurry of diplomatic discussion barely disguises the obvious, that no one in power in Europe really knows how this happened and what will happen next. Peter?
Don, we're trying to keep, obviously, monitoring the situation in Kabul tonight, and the latest pictures we've seen, there's still indications of fires going on around the city there, but there is a firm denial now from the United States that it has anything to do with whatever's going on in Kabul. It's unclear. It appears to be a fuel depot, and there has been indications that there was fire, perhaps missile fire, around the city. Now, there are suggestions now that it may be the Afghan opposition involved in attacking the capital of that country. What can you tell us about the situation in Afghanistan, not at this hour, but in general terms of the disagreements and the tension between the opposition and the government in Afghanistan?
Well, the government has been, if you will, offering shelter to Osama bin Laden, and it went out of its way today to suggest that there was no way that his group would have the resources. It was being watched by the government, that it wouldn't be in a position and would not be allowed to be in a position to undertake such attacks. Having said that, the opposition in Afghanistan, which is, if you wish, pushed into one corner of the Panjshir Valley, has been trying to mount attacks and probably looks upon today's events as a possibility, an opening to launch a minor offensive against the Taliban government, which it has to be said controls 80–90% of the territory, but may see itself today as potentially very much on the defensive. It clearly is trying to distance itself from any association with any potential finger being pointed at Osama bin Laden and his group as the perpetrators of these attacks in the United States.
All right, Don, thanks very much. Don Murray joining us from our bureau in London. Well, now to the Middle East, where pockets of Palestinians held celebrations after today's terror attacks, but in most of the region there is only shock. The CBC's Middle East correspondent Neil McDonald joins us with the latest. Neil.
Peter, the mood here in Jerusalem, and I think it's safe to say in the Palestinian territories and elsewhere in the Arab world, is a somber one. There's a feeling here of great foreboding. If, and I say if, these attacks were perpetrated by Arab extremists, then Israel is inevitably drawn into the equation, as are the Palestinians and other Arab states. For the past year, especially since the election of President Bush, Israel and the United States of America have become synonymous in the mind of the Arab street. To a great many Arabs, both countries are now bitter enemies, and that explains some of the scenes we saw here today.
In Arab East Jerusalem, groups of people took to the street. Those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks, and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman preceding Carl Levin, I can assure you
that the Congress stands behind our president, and the president speaks with one voice for this entire nation. This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history. And yet I think it can be its finest hour, as our president and those with him, most notably our Secretary of Defense, our chairman, and the men and women of the armed forces all over this world stand ready not only to defend this nation and our allies against further attack, but to take such actions as are directed in the future in retaliation for this terrorist act. A series of terrorist acts unprecedented in world history. We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack. Again, I commend the Secretary, the Chairman, and how proud we are. We spoke with our President here moments ago. He's got a firm grip on this situation, and the Secretary and the General have a firm grip on our armed forces and in communication of the world over.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few questions and then we'll adjourn. Charlie.
Mr. Secretary, did you have any inkling at all, in any way, that something of this nature and something of this scope might be planned?
Charlie, we don't discuss intelligence matters.
I see. And how would you respond if you find out who did this?
Obviously, the President of the United States has spoken on that subject, and those are issues that he will address in good time.
Mr. Yes. Secretary, we are getting reports from CNN and others that there are bombs exploding in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are we at the moment striking back, and if so, is the target Osama bin Laden and his organization?
I've seen those reports. They, in no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
What about Osama bin Laden? Do you suspect him as the prime suspect in this?
It's not the time for discussions like that.
Mr. Secretary, you said you could not be specific about casualties. Can you give us some characterization of whether it's dozens or hundreds in the building?
Well, we know there were large number, many dozens in the aircraft.
Has just finished a news conference, that news conference is still going on, but he has finished the news conference. We will have more on that in just a few minutes. But to take a look at the scene about 3 miles behind me where this plane went down, United Flight 93 left a huge crater in the ground of a strip mine here in Somerset County. That crash happened about 10 o'clock this morning. 45 people on board, 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. It was headed from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. Now, within the last hour or two, a United Airlines passenger plane flew overhead. We presume that investigators were on board to get an aerial look at the damage. Then, about 30 minutes later, investigators arrived in trucks on the grounds from United Airlines, and we also have seen an Army helicopter circle this area, land, and then it left. Now, Paula Pluta, who lives near the crash site, saw the plane go down. She went down to the crash site to take a look.
I did go down to the crash site. It's a big crater in the ground. A lot of little tiny pieces of metal, nothing big, nothing bigger than maybe a foot long that I actually saw. And fire, there was fire down there because it had caught some trees on fire, and was a huge...
Looks perhaps like it's going to be a very long night here. They've been bringing in lights, those big, huge, bright lights. They've been bringing in telephone service, so it looks like there's going to be quite a bit of